In the past 3 years, the war in Ukraine has marked a decisive turning point in global security. Low cost, mass produced, unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, have become the decisive factor on the battlefield, fundamentally altering the economics of modern warfare. Expensive, low volume traditional weapon systems are increasingly being neutralized by drones priced at just a few $1,000s. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Analytics Insight podcast, where we talk about the ever evolving tech space. And I'm your host, Priya Dialani. Now, this shift extends beyond state on state conflict. Affordable drone technology is expanding the military potential of small and medium sized nations. At the same time, it multiplies the operational capacity of non state actors, terrorist organizations, extremist groups, and criminal networks that are turning what was once an expensive domain into an accessible tool of asymmetric warfare. Let's welcome Sai Pattabhiram, founder and MD at Zuppa Geonavigation, to discuss further on the economics of drone warfare. Hi Sai, a warm welcome to our podcast today.
Great, Priya. It's a pleasure of mine, and really happy to be here. Thanks.
Likewise, say it's a pleasure to have you on our podcast. And of course, when we talk about drone technology, we have seen and witnessed the evolution of a drone, as what once started or viewed as a small camera is now expanding and evolved into a very important tool, or I would say, a weapon probably that is used across defense technology and in war fields. But of course, we have also seen the change in dynamics as well in terms of its economics, and you will shed more light on it. But before that, we would like to understand more about Zuppa geonavigation, its specialization, and alongside that, a little bit more about you, Sai. How has your journey been till date, and what probably led you to start a Zuppa?
Yeah. So, very good afternoon to all. And Zuppa is a company that's been around for close from 2008. And it was in different names. It was initially called Sri Sai Aerotech, and now it is called Zuppa. But the company's core remains the same. We initially started off by pioneering electric aero modeling into India, the same thing, which remote control planes that people fly as a hobby. So we started with that, and one thing led to another, and that was the start of the UAV, our journey into the UAV or the drone space. We initially we were system integrators where we used import drone components, put them together, and then give it to the customers, especially mainly in the area of defense R&D, that is primarily DRDO and NAL and such organizations. We were working on this, one of the programs with NAL, which is called as a man backpack UAV. And that is where, when we were working on this with an imported autopilot, we realized that there is a problem with using an imported autopilot, primarily because of the fact that you can't customize it to whatever you want. You need to use it the way it is. And the level of customization possible and the level of what you can get out of it is kind of suboptimal at times. So that's why we started working on a drone autopilot way back in 2012-13. And in 2015, we got a support of the Department of Science and Technology under the TIFAC SIDBI Srijan Innovation Fund, and that's where we created the drone autopilot in India, which was in 2015. We applied for the patent for the computing architecture in 2015, and then it was published on the World IPO site in 2017, and we were granted the Indian patent in 2024. So it's been a long journey as far as this technology evolution is concerned. But very often, most people don't recognize the fact that a drone is actually a flying computer. It's a computer in the air. So whatever applies to the PC or to the laptop or to the phone, mobile phone that we are using today, the smartphone, it also applies to the drone in terms of the computing architecture. It needs a computing architecture by which it can control the operations of the drone. So like how your Intel i5, i3, or i7 are data computing architectures. Here, in the case of a drone, you need a control computing architecture because it becomes one step more complex than a data computing architecture, because it has to control a vehicle in 3 dimensions and make it operate like how a human would. So, in a sense, it is a biomimicry of the human control system, and that's what our patent and our computing architecture is all about. So, it has been as I said earlier, it's been a long journey, and it's been a journey at times which has been quite challenging, because in India, no one really believes that. Now they believe, of course, but earlier there was nobody who believed that an Indian company could have created a computing architecture which, for something as complex as a drone, and which in many ways is similar to the computing architectures used by either Intel or Qualcomm and AMD and the likes. They have created data computing architectures, and we have created the control computing architecture in India, and that's where we see ourselves to be definitely looking at a very, very promising and a strong future, not only in India but globally as well.
Thank you for that introduction, Sai, and we're really glad to understand Zuppa does and also the larger vision driving its growth and innovation. And I'm really glad to understand how Zuppa has positioned itself in such a rapidly evolving industry while also staying focused on delivering meaningful value and impact. With that context in mind, say, now, recent Iranian strikes across the Gulf illustrate the scale of the problem. Over the course of a single weekend, Iran launched more than 500 drones alongside ballistic and cruise missiles towards the UAE and other regional targets. Emirati air defenses achieved remarkable interception rates, reportedly destroying more than 90% of incoming threats and preventing major damage to civilian population centers. Now, operationally, the defense worked. Financially, the balance looks pretty much very different. So, why are drones considered one of the biggest examples of cost asymmetry in modern defense strategy?
Well, just to put it in perspective, what UAE did in terms of interception and in terms of neutralizing the incoming threats was what the Indian air defense also did in the case of Operation Sindoor. But and we also did exactly the same thing of using very, very expensive equipment as compared to the incoming threat. So it is the asymmetry is a financial today. Previously the asymmetry was more related to the equipment per se. For example, if you say that a horse replaced a tank, that was an asymmetry where the tank had certain very, very significant upsides, and but also the cost of a tank and the cost of a horse were also way different, and the tank was very, very compared to the horse. The same way, if you look at it, as bombs were upgraded into missiles, the missiles also turned out to be more expensive. So we've been used to a cost asymmetry which is on the rise, which means what was replacing the equipment that it was like whatever was being replaced was much cheaper in terms of cost than what was replacing it, but it was adopted because of its technological advantages and because of the fact that it was far more effective than what it was replaced. So this is an asymmetry that the defense and in general has been used to and has been looking at for all these years. But this is the first time that the cost symmetry is flipped the other way around, where the cost of the equipment that is destroying and the destroyed, if it is compared, the cost of the weapon that is used to destroy is far lower than what is the cost of the equipment that it is being countered by, or it is kind of impact. So this is a very new shift, and of course this started happening all the way from in the Ukraine-Russian war itself. It was seen way back in 2022, but it wasn't so noticeable to us because I think it was geographically quite a distance from us, so we couldn't really visualize what was happening. But because we are so heavily connected to the Middle East, and the fact that it is right in our neighborhood, that we are now noticing the cost asymmetry. The cost asymmetry is nothing new. It's been happening for the last 3 to 4 years. And I think this particular asymmetry is going to go even further. And it is not only the cost asymmetry that is the question here. Today, the manufacturing asymmetry is also a major consideration to be taken into account. So, for example, previously most defense equipment were either produced in possibly hundreds or thousand pieces per lot. But today we are talking about defense equipment that has to be produced at an industrial scale, running into possibly lakhs and millions of equipment in a particular time period. For example, some a country like Ukraine produces in a year possibly 4 million drones, and that is a huge change from the kind of equipment that was being used in defense in the past, both in terms of cost and in terms of volumes. And that's one of the reasons why, if you see in the West Asian war, that is the Iranian West Asian war, we saw that beyond a point of time it becomes very difficult for any country which is under attack by lower cost equipment to keep the interception up. The reason being that the while low cost drones can be produced in the millions, the missiles that are being used against them cannot be produced. They have been produced in the past in the hundreds or the thousands. So obviously they are not enough to counter these drones. So that's where the new concept of interceptor drones is coming up, and there the cost symmetry is flipping the other way around, because now a Shahed would cost 20,000 and interceptor would cost $5,000. So that is the difference that is being flipped with the interceptor drones. And I think this cat and mouse kind of situation will continue for some time. And the technology change is happening at such a rapid pace that you're having changes. Technology obsolescence is today defined in weeks rather than in years. We are talking about months or weeks by which the technology becomes obsolete or your solution becomes obsolete. So there is another asymmetry that's gotten, that you need to be continuously upgrading it, and you need to be able to continuously upgrade it. So these are all the multiple asymmetries that are there when you talk about asymmetry.
True, true. That's a very important perspective you shared, Sai. And what makes this shift particularly significant is how drones have fundamentally changed the economics of warfare.
True.
Traditionally, military advantage was often tied to the size of a defense budget and the ability to invest in expensive platforms and equipment. Today,
True.
however, relatively low-cost drone systems can challenge or even neutralize assets that cost millions of dollars to acquire and maintain.
True. True.
Yeah. Now, building
Yeah.
on that thought, now as global military strategies evolve, I think drones particularly stands out as one of the most important tech innovation because of its transformative potential. Once regarded as futuristic novelty, drones have now become indispensable tools in modern warfare and national defense. So, in terms of Indian context, I would like to ask you that what role does domestic drone manufacturing play in national security and defense resilience?
See, to answer that question, you will need to look at the geopolitics of things, and you need to, look at the geopolitical picture that India today is in. Today, if you look at it, majority of the supply chains, even for the Indian drones that are there in the inventory of the armed forces, are largely Chinese. So most of the components, most of the equipment has come from China, has been assembled in India, and it has been supplied to the Indian Army or to the defense forces. So this is a major problem as far as the geopolitics of things goes. Things go as far as India is concerned, because China is on the other side of the border, both on the eastern and the western side. And western side, it is supporting our western neighbor quite aggressively, and I think in Operation Sindoor we saw a lot of it happen. And on the eastern side, it is China itself is our adversary. So having a supply chain that originates from there is not something that India can afford to have. And I think this realization has already set in post Operation Sindoor. Even prior to that, when the Indian drones were hacked in August 2024, and in between May 2022, which was the Galwan period, to August 2024, when the drone was hacked at the Rajouri sector, we've seen that this vulnerability in terms of cybersecurity and in terms of supply chain has been a defining factor in the Indian drones ecosystem. And this is already realized, accepted, and remedial action is being taken by the armed forces and the government to, in the form of a cybersecurity framework, which is soon to be put in place. Then the DAP 2026 draft that was put out had a significant push towards indigenous electronic stack, and is given far more weightage for an indigenous electronic stack rather than even a TOT from a friendly country. So India is requiring to build. But the way I see it is that this particular situation where we are kind of having to, in a way, say that, with your backs to the wall, you're having to build. But that is always a good situation, because ultimately, when you do finish and when you do build up a viable and a workable solution for yourself, it becomes a major advantage for the nation from a national security perspective. But in this case, as I mentioned, thanks to the geopolitical situation, the entire global order is split into two, which is either with China or opposite on the other side of the fence as far as China is concerned. So India has the opportunity to emerge as an alternative to all countries which are not on the same side as China in the geopolitical context, and to be able to work with them to achieve a global, to evolve into a global hub for an emerging technology like drones. I believe is a strong, very, very, very good and strong opportunity for India. And we have the additional, so to say, reputation of also very, very ethical technological partner. When you take the case of IT or any of the other industries, we've gained the reputation of being a fairly reliable and ethical technology partner. And I think that is something that will definitely stand and will support India in emerging as global hub, in this kind of emerging technology, and give the opportunity for the country to really get to its potential, primarily because the problem that we are solving, which is the non-Chinese requirement of components and drones, is exactly the same problem that Europe has, is exactly the same problem that US has, is exactly the same problem that the Middle East countries today. So I think we have a good potential to, when you look at it from a business perspective, but yes, the grind has to be gone through as far as building those capabilities that are required to address not only our requirement but all these other global requirements. Once we need to go through the process of building that.
Right, right. And I think this has become, especially at a time when nations are increasingly looking to reduce dependencies on external supply chains for critical defense technologies. So this becomes a very important aspect, I believe. And I think overall, domestic drone manufacturing is no longer just an industrial objective. It's also becoming a strategic imperative. Beyond strengthening military capabilities, it enables faster innovation cycles, greater control over sensitive technologies, and improved operational readiness during time of crisis. So it's about building a self-reliant and future-ready defense infrastructure, which can adapt rapidly, with the changing battlefield requirements.
True, true.
Now, with that being said, I think we discussed the importance and integration of drones. We have also witnessed that there are advancements in autonomous navigation, real-time data analytics, precision imaging. So drones are increasingly entrusted with critical missions that demand accuracy, agility, and minimal latency. So drones and military operations kind of now go hand in hand with these UAVs deployed for target acquisition and battlefield monitoring and much more. So how will AI-driven autonomy change the strategic role as well as the economics of drones in the future?
Well, you see, today, one thing is very obvious, that I think the days of one operator to one drone are pretty much they're not going to be viable in the future, which primarily means that you need to be able to operate, one single operator needs to be able to operate multiple drones at the same time. And this is a key essential, which is the technology of swarming that is slowly started coming about. Then the second thing is that now a lot of the counter drone systems that are being deployed, which are dependent on RF jamming and GPS spoofing and those kind of countermeasures, today are also going out of sync with the requirements of the technology that is evolving and that is emerging now, where autonomous GPS denied and able to operate in contested airspace are now mandatory for any kind of defense, organization. So I think it is important now for most of the operators and countries to start looking at electronic autonomy, and also to be able to start, today the hardware is becoming more or less a given, and the applications on top of that are becoming more software driven and AI driven. So considering this software driven factor and the AI driven factor, it is important for, it is going to be imperative for organizations and countries to move towards electronic autonomy, and to move towards things like, what I mean is, GPS, to move towards autonomy is going to come through in any way, and autonomy is going to be driven by AI, and that AI, operating the AI on the edge for targeting, for navigation, even for countering drones, is going to become something that's going to be absolutely a must have for any drone that is operated for national security purposes. And we are seeing that already happening as far as Ukraine and Russia is concerned. We are seeing that happening in the Middle East war as well, but more so in Ukraine and Russia, where a lot of use of AI is happening today on the edge, especially for counter drone and for targeting by the drones. Counter drone, in the sense, for interceptor drones, are quite AI intensive. They've got a lot of software related, upgrades like swarms and things like that. So I think those are all things that are going to play out in the future.
Very well put out, Sai. And I think AI is transforming drones from remotely operated tools into more intelligent and decision-making systems capable of executing complex missions with minimal human intervention. And as autonomy continues to evolve, we are not just going to enjoy the benefits or improvements in just operational efficiency. I think we'll be witnessing a very important shift in the economics of a drone deployment as well. Because that way, organizations can potentially reduce manpower requirements, optimize resource utilization, and scale operations in ways that were previously difficult or cost prohibitive.
Yeah, that is going to be the case. Yes.
Yeah, and I think not more than ever, defense sectors and policymakers are also likely to prioritize investment in innovative drone technologies to remain competitive and also have a very secured position in the evolving geopolitical landscape. So, one last question for you, Sai, is
Sure.
what does the rise of drone warfare tell us about the future relationship between technology, economics, and national security?
See, the as we've seen and as we've discussed also earlier, today just having a superior machine that can overcome your adversary is not just enough. Today we are seeing that even a country like Ukraine has been able to keep a superpower like Russia at bay, and it has been quite a stalemate kind of a situation for the last 3 to 4 years. There's a little bit of advancements here and there, but nothing really which is, where people said that Ukraine would be run over in a couple of days' time. Today we are years in the war, and still they're maintaining their position. So I think one of the critical aspects that is going to turn out is to be able to defend yourself. And I think drones will, you might or might not be able to attack yourself, but what is going to be more important is, if somebody attacks you, to be able to defend yourself and to maintain your position. And you've seen that happen even in the case of Iran, where Iran hasn't moved an inch towards any of the other countries, but they have inflicted damages in the other countries. And the other countries also haven't been able to really get into Iran or do too much in Iran to be able to, kind of cripple it in ways. And this, even with a superpower like US, as well as combined with Israel attacking Iran, Iran has been able to maintain its defensive position as well as create, attack from without moving into the enemy's territory. So I think this remote warfare is going to be something that will be a future. And of course, at the end of the day, if you want to capture territory and land, you require boots on the ground, you require tanks to go in, and those kind of things to happen. But the vulnerability of these equipment with that drones create is something that also holds back their use. So it is more and more of these wars are going to be extended wars, like as we are seeing it in the case of Ukraine, Russia running into years, and then even in the case of the West Asian US, Israel, Iran war, we are seeing that even today at day 70 plus, it's more or less status quo with neither side having, kind of given in too much or given space. They've been all maintaining their borders. They've been attacking each other across remotely from across by being in their very borders. So I think this is going to be a trend that will happen. So we might see extended wars. We might see wars that are lasting for a longer duration but are remote without either of these sides moving into the other territory. And this is something that is likely to be seen going forward. And this also, the drones also, have kind of enabled weaker countries to be able to take on much larger and much stronger in terms of equipment nations. And this is the case in both these wars. We are seeing that weaker countries have been able to hold their ground. And I think this is something also that is going to be there. That is going to be visible going forward. So it is providing a kind of a perceived weaker country the advantage, which advantage to turn the tables on the much larger aggressors. So I think this is going to be something that is going to continue, and this is going to be something that will extended wars, skirmishes, on and off will all continue, and this is what will be something that will be defining future warfare.
I agree with you, Say, and I think the integration of drones into military strategies has shifted focus from traditional high-cost hardware to agile, versatile systems that are capable of delivering precision strikes while minimizing human casualties.
True,
As you know, emerging conflicts illustrate the strategic deployment of both short and long range drones is not just a tactical advantage, but a
true,
transformative shift in the nature of warfare. Thank
true.
you so much, Sai, for taking
Welcome,
all the time and effort to be on our
welcome.
podcast today and
Thanks a lot.
giving us insights about the economic inversion and the rapid tech advancements that are going to happen and already happening in the drone space, and how it is also reshaping the landscape of a modern warfare. So it was a very insightful conversation, and thank you so much for your valuable insights.
Welcome. It's been my pleasure, and it's been really great talking to you. Thanks a lot.
Likewise, say. So, this is for our listeners. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion around the role of drones and the changing economics around the modern warfare and drones. And, it's kind of leveling the playing field between well-funded militaries and those with more limited resources, but a greater technological sophistication. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes, and you can view all our previous episodes on Spotify and other leading platforms. Thank you so much.